Hey everybody, it is Saturday morning. Just got the lights turned on and we are going to do a quick impromptu trip around the world here. I have still not done anything with my waterfall other than my preliminary tests to see whether or not the basins will hold water in them, and you can see that lower basin there is still holding water just fine. In fact, most of it is now slowly evaporating away, and likewise with this upper basin, the water is still just sitting there. I've got no traces of water in the back, and so I think we're probably about ready to start moving forward with trying to get that up and running again. Even if I get it running and I get a little bit of leaking, it always leaked on me before. I just dealt with it. I don't care if it's a little bit leaking here and there, a few drips in the back. I can put a tray under that to catch the water. The reason I shut it down was because the leak was getting pretty significant, and I was afraid. I don't know if you've ever watched a dam burst, but it usually gets a little bit worse, a little bit worse, a little bit worse, and then all of a sudden it's gone. And that's what I was afraid of. I was afraid of that sort of dam bursting scenario where I was suddenly going to have a huge leak and I was going to come down in the morning to water all over the floor or something like that. And so I shut it down. But my fears of that have subsided somewhat, knowing that the leak is not really coming from the basin. I think we can slap some of that plastic paint, that rubber paint that I got on there. It's latex rubber. I don't know how well it's going to stick to the silicone, but we'll find out. So I don't know when I'm going to get started on that, but I do feel like I'm ready to proceed whenever that creative bug hits me. I learned long ago I can't force that creativity. I have to just wait till I'm ready to do it and I'm in the mood to do it, and I'll be down here tinkering one day and one thing will lead to another, and before you know it, we're going to be working on the waterfall again. But again, I can't force that to happen. So in the meantime, we still just have the tank ticking over. I've still got my filter in here running, so we got plenty of water circulation. I did buy another small power head like the one that I've put in my Brackish tank. If you didn't see that video, we'll talk about that when we get around to my Brackish tank. But I did get another small power head, and I'm going to put it in this tank so that I have a bit of redundancy until I get the waterfall up and going again. Originally, this filter here on the side, we can call it a hang on the side filter, that was the redundancy. That was the little additional water circulation in case the waterfall wasn't there. And so now that the waterfall is not there, we're down to that being the primary source of circulation in this tank. I'm not so worried about filtration. I've never had proper filtration in this tank. I'm just concerned about the water circulation. The filtration can take care of itself in the tank, so we're not going to worry about that. I've also been doing some experiments with mulm. This tank has a lot of mulm in it, and this tank has a lot of mulm in it, and I have been thinking a lot about that and doing some experiments with that. So we will be shooting a video here in the very near future talking about mulm. I know that's not a really exciting topic, but it's certainly an interesting one, and we will be getting into that in an upcoming video in the very near future. So subscribe and ring that bell and you will not miss that one. So that's about all that's going on with my waterfall tank. No new fish, nobody's died, nothing like that. Everything is still just ticking right along. And we are now going to turn this light out to make the rest of the videos a little less glary. So my 29 miscellaneous tank got a water change the other day, and I got the glass wiped down and looking good. The plants in here are really starting to need a trim. The Java there on the left is starting to get so big that it's kind of starting to fill up the space in the tank. But it has been so many years since I've done any kind of plant trimming in this tank. The last trimming I did was to this piece of Anubias, and I cut it off down here, and we're now starting to get a few new leaves and stuff like that. But this tank has the lighting that came with it. It's the little LED lighting that comes with the hood, so not very bright, not very powerful, and not specific for plant growth. It's just low quality LED lighting, and these low plant, these plants that don't need a lot of light do fine with that, but they don't grow vigorously like I have the plants in my other tanks. My other tanks have like shop lights and floodlights and stuff like that on them, and that light makes a difference. My other tanks grow like crazy. I get algae in them, I get cyanobacteria in them, the plants grow like crazy. This tank just kind of cruises along, and I chalk it up largely to two things. One, I never mess with this tank. I just let it sit here, and it's just sort of found its own stasis. It just sits where it is, and I don't have a ton of light on it. And those two things combined make this one of my most stable tanks and one of the most slow growing tanks. This little piece of Anubias down there in the corner that you can see, this one here, I don't even know how many years old that is. That's been in here as long as the tank has been here, as far as I know, and that's been 8 years, maybe 7 years probably, and I've never trimmed that. I've never cut that. That's what that still looks like after all that time. It's just sitting there. It's still alive, it's still healthy, it's still green, and you can even see that one leaf there on the top is a new leaf. So it's still putting out new growth, but it just does it at an incredibly slow pace, and that's fine. I like it doing that. It's still alive, it's still a nice green healthy plant, and I don't have to do any maintenance to it and get in there and keep chopping it and rearranging it and trimming it and everything else. This tank just kind of ticks over and looks nice. And before I spooked it and scared it into the back, I hope you got a good look at that angelfish that's in here. I don't even know where he is now. He's hiding in the back somewhere. Oh, there he is. He's over on that side now. That was just a PetSmart special. I saw it in the tank for, you know, oh, no. I got this one at my Good Pet store. I'm sorry. But it was just an assorted angelfish. It was not anything special. There's no fancy name attached to it, and I didn't pay a lot of money for it. I just saw that it was going to be a beautiful angelfish when it grew up. And it is clearly proving me right. It is absolutely gorgeous. I love that angelfish, and it's still got a long way to go. So I think that one's going to turn out to be a real looker by the time it's full grown and really develops that full finish and those colors and everything. So look forward to that. Moving on to my 55-gallon Gourami tank. I did some work in here recently. I did a water change. I cleaned out some of the plants that were in there floating, and I wiped down the front glass, but that's about all I did. I didn't do a filter change or mess with anything like that. I'm really happy with my pearl gouramis that I've put in here. They look so good. I've never really had a lot of success with pearl gouramis in the past, but I've also never kept them the way I'm keeping them now. I've always kept them with other gouramis, and they would always get harassed, and I'd always keep maybe one or two of the pearl gouramis rather than a large group. So now we don't have other gouramis in the tank. We've just got the pearl gouramis, and I've got 8 of the pearl gouramis, and they seem to be thriving. None of the other fish seem to be bothering them. The skirt tetras aren't nipping at their fins. I've never really had a problem with the skirt tetras being fin nippers. They can be, but I've never really had an issue with it, and there's enough of them in there, and this is a big enough tank. It's just never been a problem for me. Yeah, obviously, if they were fin nippers, we would have issues in this tank, you know. So the black skirt tetras don't bother me. They don't bother the other fish. They're not really much in the way of fin nippers, and that allows these very docile, peaceful gourami to thrive. They're doing really well. It looks like I've got 3 males, or at least 3 that are definitely male. That's the one I've been looking for. That is definitely the most dominant male in the tank, and I've never seen a pearl gourami look that good. And I know that's nowhere near as good as it can look. When these mature and get into full spawning condition, I'm really excited about the way these are going to look. These pearl gouramis are gorgeous. So that's going to be neat. I can't wait to see those grow up. And again, I'm having more success with them this time than I've ever had before. You can see how they're in and out of this water sprite. They really seem to enjoy that. They've been feeding on the roots and nipping at the roots. They're actually starting to help keep all that fuzzy green algae in check. You can see my little rubber lip pleco there doing his job, earning his keep. But all this green algae that's starting to grow all over that Java Windelov in there, they're keeping that in check, and they're getting that under control, so that's awesome. I don't know how I did it, but apparently I contaminated this tank with Java moss too, and that Java moss has now grabbed a hold of that piece of woodwork and is going to start eating this tank alive. So I'll be ripping a bunch of that out of there. And as always, I've got plants available for sale. I've got this water sprite. I've got Java Windalove. I've got tons and tons of Java moss. Anybody wants Java moss, let me know. As always, my email information is in the description down below. You contact me, we'll talk about it. I got lots of plants for sale if you're interested in that. So all in all, my Gourami tank is doing really well. I'm really happy with the way things are shaping up. I struggled with it for a while. I got frustrated and I walked away. I let it settle down. And as usual, I find that patience and leaving things be and leaving things alone is often the best course of action when you're trying to sort out issues. If it's not an issue that's putting your fish in an immediate risk, like excess ammonia or your pH is shifting wildly or something, if you're just having problems like algae that you can't get under control or something like that, a lot of times the more you mess with it, the worse you make it. And sometimes just walking it away and letting it all fall over is one of the better things you can do. And that's kind of what I did with this tank, and I'm glad I did. It took about 6 months of looking awful, you know, and now it's looking like this, and it's really starting to come together. I got the Gourami in there, and the Gourami are just looking fantastic. These plants are doing well. The algae's back under control, and oh look, I got Java moss contaminating this piece of wood too. Stuff's like a plague. It's beautiful, but it'll eat your tank. So the Gourami tank's up and running, looking good. I'm happy with that. Moving on to my 55-gallon tank. Not a lot to talk about in here. I do have 2 of my diamond tetras that are not doing well. One has this cloudy eye, and its color seems to be a little off and everything. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. It's been that way for quite a while now. And then I have one other one who has a swim bladder issue and constantly has to swim to stay up off the bottom. So I'm not really sure what's going on with that. I do fairly frequent water changes in this tank because I've got a big fat pleco in here, as evidenced by all of the strings of poop all over the bottom of this tank. You can especially see back in this corner. It's just everywhere. That pleco is a poop machine. And so I do get in this tank fairly regularly and try to get it cleaned up. My Siamese algae eaters, they're getting old and they're starting to do a lot of laying around in the bushes. I don't know if you can tell or not, but underneath of the algae eater right here, this little dark mass is actually my bumblebee, South American bumblebee catfish, who doesn't really have enough space on the bottom to hide. I do have a Synodontis lucipinus catfish that pretty much prowls the bottom of the tank and hides in what little cave systems there are. And so I would imagine every time this little South American bumblebee tries to get in one of those caves, it either gets run out by that or it gets run out by my big pleco that is hiding in the tank somewhere at the moment. It's hard to imagine that that fish can actually hide in this tank for as big as it is, but it does. It gets up in the Anubias and you can't even see it in there. So I don't see it at all. You usually will see its fin sticking out or its tail jutting out somewhere, and I am not seeing hide nor hair of it today. It's just amazing. And again, for my regular viewers, you know what I'm talking about. It's not a small fish. It's a big pleco. It's probably a full 8 or 9 inches long at this point. It's so big that it really needs to come out of the tank, and it is just amazing that I do not see it at all. Almost to the point where I'm wondering if it's still in there. I don't know how it would have gotten out or where it would have gone, but it is just invisible. That is incredible. Absolutely amazing. I suspect it's back in there. It seems awfully sort of dark and dense towards the back, and I'm imagining that's because there's a big fat fish hiding in that. So I'm going to have to come back after this video's over and see if I can find it and figure out where it was hiding. I'm tempted to stick my arm in there right now and see if I can't wiggle it out of there. This has gotten me puzzled. Well, I don't feel it back there anywhere. I'm definitely scared that bumblebee catfish out of his little hiding place. So the only other place it could be would be over here. Oh, there he is. So you can see I wasn't kidding. That's not a small fish, and yet it was completely hidden in that Anubias. That is just amazing. So he's probably not happy with me right now. But there you go. So I mean, that gives you a size of how big it is. Alright, calm down. Alright everybody, this video is already starting to run really long and we're not even halfway there yet. Fortunately, we can just kind of skip over this tank. This is my 40 breeder, and once again, it's just still sitting here ticking over. I haven't done anything to it. It's just still kind of waiting to become something. I'm just not really sure what it's going to become. I do have this crazy, I'm guessing it's probably blackbeard algae, but it's just this black fuzzy looking stuff that just grows all over everything in there. If that is blackbeard algae, let me know, because I'm not exactly 100% sure of what that is. For all the years I've been doing this, you think I'd be able to identify the blackbeard algae right away. I've just never seen algae grow like this and be all fuzzy like that. When I think of blackbeard algae, I think of, you know, like an Anubias leaf will have sort of like a edge of like sort of black fuzz sticking out away from the edge. All, you know, again, looking like a sort of rough beard around the edge of the leaves. To see it growing in these weird sort of patches and clumps like this and spreading across the bottom, is that simply because there's so much of it, it's being so, you know, just allowed to do its thing and grow? Is that what it eventually turns into? And if so, why do I have leaves that are completely bereft of it? I mean, they're just completely clean. I do have some rubber lips in here, and I do have the Siamese algae eaters in this tank. That's, in fact, that's all that's in this tank is algae eating fish. But as far as I know, they don't eat blackbeard algae. And if they did, why is there any of it in there at all? That would certainly be easy pickings and good, you know, food if that's something that they would regularly eat. So I'm a little puzzled by what all that black stuff is. I'm assuming it's blackbeard algae, but I don't know. So I would be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Otherwise, this tank is just sitting there, and that stuff's been in here for months and months and months. That's not new. I've just never really talked about it before. So there you go. Moving on to my 125 gallon New World tank. Nothing really going on in here either. I really didn't think there was a lot to talk about at all in this video, but you know how I am. I can get to talking about anything and stretch it out way longer than it really needs to be. But with the New World tank here, the only thing that's happened recently that would be any different would be I put my sunfish, my bluegill sunfish that was in my native tank has been moved over into this tank. I did that a while ago, so that's not particularly new. But just in case that is, you know, you're just getting caught up after a while, that's probably the newest thing I've done to this tank, except for I put some more spotted silver dollars in there. They were rescues from Petco. Somebody had to move and they couldn't take their fish with them, so I got them at a rescue price or an adoption price, whatever you want to call it, at the Petco, and I was able to get some more silver dollars added to my school. I have another one of those big plecos in this tank, but this is a 125 gallon tank, and so that's a little more appropriately fitted. And then, of course, I've got Flo, my spotted tilapia, in the back, who is just a beauty. She's got a lot of personality, too. She's a strange fish. She cracks me up. She always tussles with this pleco, and yet this pleco, for some reason, always hangs out at her end of the tank, even though she always tussles with it. It's like this weird love-hate relationship. They almost remind me like of an old married couple that just bickers all the time. They don't not like each other. They just bicker all the time, you know? It's just, but they're always still together all the time. It's weird. So I always kind of think of them as like an old married couple. Other than that, like I say, not a lot going on. Just have a little look at the tank swimming around. Oh, I did throw a bunch of red wag platies in this tank a while ago. I didn't expect them to live very long, so I never even bothered to mention it. But it looks like I've still got 3. Nope, there's 4 and 5. Okay, I was going to say I got 5 of them in here that seemed like they were big enough that they avoided predation and we're going to actually stay in the tank and last. I was wondering what to do with all of my red wag platies because I've got them breeding and I don't know what to do with all of them. And so it occurred to me that they are native New World fish. They are North and South American. So that's New World all the way, you know, so they can easily go into my New World tank. They seem a little out of place because most every fish in this tank is fairly subdued in color. This is not a really bright, flashy tank, and so having those little splashes of orange or, you know, those red wag platies in here, wherever they went, they stand out. So I'm still not sure if I really like them being in here or not, but I don't dislike them being in here, and they got to go somewhere. At least in this tank, they stood a chance. If I put them in my 125, they were absolutely guaranteed to be Tenopoma food, and so in this tank, I figured at least they stood a chance. And some of them survived. A lot of them got eaten, but some of them survived. So that's how it goes. Moving on to my snail tank. I know that's just a tank that I breed snails in, but we actually are going to be talking about this tank in an upcoming video. I've got stuff to talk about with this. I've made some discoveries. So make sure you're subscribed, as I said before, and you won't miss that or anything else. And we're going to move right over to my native tank. This is the tank that little sunfish just came out of. It was getting so big that I think it was harassing the Gambusia in this tank, and I think it was also either scaring the crayfish or possibly even killing some of the crayfish that were in here. So I moved it, and within a day or so I saw more activity with the crayfish, and since then, I don't know how that looks to you, but to me that looks like no activity. That looks like a very undisturbed bottom. And if you've got crayfish in the tank, my purple bedroom slippers are showing up in the reflection. If you're wondering what all that purple is down there, that's my feet. That just looks like an undisturbed bottom to me. If you've got active crayfish in a tank, they are little construction workers. They're diggers, they're burrowers, they move stuff around, they root through the substrate looking for food bits. You will see fresh turned over gravel. You're not going to see accumulated piled up mulm. You're not going to see stuff building up on the sticks like that. So I'm wondering whether or not I've actually even got living crayfish in this tank. That cave right there is the only one I know that crayfish would stay in, and I can't see into it anymore. It's been like the back of it's closed off now with mulm and crud and stuff, which again leads me to wonder if there's even any crayfish in there. Now, I have it so that if they try to climb out, they will, you know, basically encounter that. If they try to climb up the rope, they can only go so far, or the cord, I should say. You know, both corners, it's the same way. If they go up, they got a power head over here, and so if they try to climb up the cord, they hit that. But they could, in theory, crawl along this lip. You can actually, you know, get your claws in there, and if you think that seems awfully acrobatic for a crayfish to crawl up a power cord, get its claws into this little lip and work its way down and get up and out and over, then you've never had crayfish before, because they're little escape artists. They're stronger than you could think, and they will do things that you'd be surprised about. Not sure what that is. That looks like one of those little water little water striders, little pond skimmer. It looks dead though, whatever it is. Wish it would focus on it. Let's try doing it this way. There we go. Maybe just a little dead spider. Yeah, it just looks like a little dead spider. So I need to get in there and change the filter out. You can see how little water flow we've got. I deliberately put some Java moss in this tank, and it's actually growing and starting to do well, and we're actually going to have Java moss growing all over this. I put a little bit up front right here, so we're going to have some Java moss growing there. So this should be interesting as it starts to develop. But we need to get in here. We need to do some more work. I want to get some more fish added to this tank. I don't know where the fish went. Maybe the crayfish got them. But wherever the crayfish went, I don't see any evidence of any crayfish in here. So I'm going to get in this tank and do a little work. We're going to move some stuff around maybe and see if I can't find a crayfish. And if not, then you can look forward to a crayfishing video soon. We're going to be going out and trying to catch one. So moving on to my 125, let's come all the way back here where we can get the whole tank in one view. And of course you can see I got all my food and junk and stuff piled up on top of it. As I said, this is an impromptu video. This tank is being treated for the cyanobacteria yet again. And I've been talking for a while about the idea that maybe the cyanobacteria in my tanks is so persistent and I can never fully get rid of it because I've created ChemiClean resistant strains of cyanobacteria because I can just never seem to fully eradicate it. And so what I did this time was when my ChemiClean ran out, I purchased Ultralife blue-green stain remover. It's another product. I used to use it years ago, and then I tried ChemiClean one time, and I had such good luck with the ChemiClean that that's what I've used ever since. And so I'm almost wondering if it was the same scenario. I'd used the Ultralife for so long that it wasn't that effective anymore, and when I switched to ChemiClean, I had great results at first. Now I've been using the ChemiClean so long that it never really fully eradicated the cyanobacteria. And so now I've put the Ultralife in there again, and it really looks like it took out that last little bit. Down here on these rocks, there was always little bits of dark green on the stems on this Anubias. I could never fully get all that really dark green cyanobacteria off of it. And on this Java Windelov up here, I know it's covered in that hair algae, but it also used to have that dark green cyanobacteria that just would not get out of there. I would always have a little bit left over, and so no matter what, when the treatment was over, it would just start growing back. So every treatment was just like a haircut. It would just get it way back, and then it would just grow back in and fill back in. It would never get it out of the tank. And so now it actually looks like I might be able to finish this treatment, pull the air stones out, and have a cyanobacteria-free tank for a while. I know it'll come back. I know it's just in the air. It's in my basement. It's in my other tanks. And I'm not, again, I've said before, I don't treat this basement fish room like a surgery. So I don't sterilize my equipment from tank to tank. I don't wash my hands between tank to tank. I'm just not that finicky about it. And the result is, I know that that's the result. I get, I expect to have cyanobacteria in this tank again at some point in the future. But I think the ChemiClean, the Ultralife this time might have really knocked it out for good. I don't know if you can tell that lavender gourami was hiding in there, but she always tucks herself right up in there. That's like her spot in the tank. She loves just sitting there hanging out, hiding. And then, of course, that's a snakeskin gourami, much, much larger fish. That's about 8 inches long now. But she's a full-grown lavender gourami. She's probably bigger than you might expect at first glance, too. This is a fish I got from a buddy of mine. He's having issues in his tank. Not getting along with the others, not playing well with others, and so she ended up over here, and I think she's probably happier over here too because she looks really good in this tank. And that is the Tenopoma I was talking about. So if I had put any, I don't know if you just noticed it yawn a few minutes ago or a few moments ago, but even a full-grown platy is fish food to that fish. So putting platies in this tank is basically just feeding my Tenopoma platies. So moving on to my deep sandbed tank. This tank also has had issues with the cyanobacteria, mainly from that piece of wood. I just grabbed a piece of wood from the reservoir, I brought it home, and I put it in my tank, as I am wont to do, and surprise, I got cyanobacteria in the tank. So again, I'm kidding about the surprise. I know this, you know, when people try to explain to me where it's coming from or what's happening, I'm not confused about that. I know when you just grab a piece of wood off of the side of the road somewhere and you throw it in your tank, you're probably going to get like some algae and stuff in the tank. And I've gotten cyanobacteria in this tank almost immediately. And again, even if I hadn't, I would have eventually. I just do. Some tanks get it and it goes crazy in it. Some tanks get a little bit of cyanobacteria, just sort of sits there and does nothing. I have other tanks that don't seem to get it at all. I've long ago given up trying to figure out what makes cyanobacteria tick or why it thrives in some situations and not in others. I have no idea. I've just gotten to the point where I just deal with it. I treat it like mowing the lawn. You cut the lawn, it's going to grow back someday, but that's fine. You'll deal with it when it grows back and you'll mow it again, you know, and that's just the way I've always dealt with the cyanobacteria. But this tank is also getting the ultralife treatment, and I'm hoping all this wood, there was all the cyanobacteria all over that, and it looks like once again I'm finally getting it knocked back completely. I've also got 3 GBRs in this tank. We're going to be shooting some video talking about them. I'm not going to go into it now. We're already running much longer than I wanted to on this video, but again, that's how it goes with me sometimes. So I got 3 GBRs in this tank, and I hope that I've got a pair and then an oddball at this point. And if I've got a pair and then an oddball, which certainly seems to be the case, then the oddball is going to go upstairs into my wife's tank. It's a 20-gallon tank, and I'm always looking for some sort of feature fish. I need something in there to keep the guppies and the platies population in check, so I need something that's going to be at least somewhat predatory. And I love these German blue rams. They have so much personality. They're so beautiful, and a 20-gallon tank is plenty big enough, so hopefully we're going to be able to do that. But again, we'll be talking more about that later. We're going to talk about what happened to the last German blue ram that was in here, and we're going to be talking about the 3 that are currently in there, and we'll also talk about that deep sand bed and the denitrification and so on and so forth. So again, I'm going to say once again, subscribe, etc., etc. You won't miss any of that. Quarantine tank down to 5 platies, but give it a couple of more weeks and I will probably have 1 million of them in there again. Probably ought to get in there and maybe pull some of that duckweed off of the filter intake, but again, not too worried about it. You can see the water moving on the surface there. These live bears are pretty hardy. They'll be fine. So moving on to my brackish tank, which again is not truly brackish anymore, but is still just named my brackish tank. Nothing really going on in this tank except for way back in the video. If you're still with me through all of this, you'll remember I mentioned a new power head that I put in this tank. That is right there. It's a really small power head. It has an opening on this face. So if that were on the bottom facing upward, it would act like a fountain pump. Or you could pump water up to the surface, or you could use it in conjunction with a sponge filter, something like that. Nice handy little power head. It only moves 80 gallons per hour, which is not a lot, but all I wanted it for was just a little bit of redundancy. I had an issue a while ago where I forgot to shut this or forgot to get this filter back up and running, and this tank went stagnant for quite a while, and I had some health issues with Butterbean. If you'll remember, his eye got all boogered up and cloudy and swollen, and I had to medicate him. And you can see that's his bad eye right there, his left eye. You can see he's fully recovered. His eye's nice and clear again. It's no longer puffy, and he looks just fine. So no worries. But you know, it was a boneheaded mistake. And then the thing that really kills me about that is how I managed to go the literally months, I'm not kidding when I say that, months between water changes, and it wasn't until I got to the next water change that I realized that the filter wasn't working. And so this tank sat here stagnant for months before his eye started getting infected, and you know, the conditions were getting bad enough that I was starting to run into problems. But it took that long for me to even notice that that filter wasn't running. But in fairness, I mean, when you look at the tank, you can't really see the surface unless you get way down here. Then you can see water movement on the surface, and even then it's not a lot. I mean, that's normal functioning right there. That's what it's supposed to look like. So the filter was running. I just didn't have it opened up so that it was flowing in the tank. So I could hear the filter running. You know, every time I would touch the tank or I would touch the stand, I could feel the vibration of the filter running. And I never noticed that the water wasn't flowing. And anyway, the end result was that I put that little secondary power head in there. That's exactly the one I've got that's going to go in my Waterfall tank where we opened. And on that note, I'm going to wrap it up right there at about 35 minutes. So there you are. We're already back to where we started, more or less. And I will be able to finish with a look at that angelfish. So I wasn't kidding when I said it's going to grow up to be a real looker. That's not even full grown yet. And it already looks like that. It is so pretty with those dark highlights and those lines, the patterning on it. It is a crazy, gorgeous angelfish. Love this fish. You can see all those hints of blue. There's almost purple in there when you really start looking, the way that dark color blends with that sort of silvery color. There's almost like a purple transition in between them. Just an incredible angelfish. Absolutely beautiful. So if you made it all the way to the end and you stuck with me, you got that nice little treat of seeing that angelfish right there at the end. So I'm going to say thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed. Don't forget, I've got my Amazon storefront now. You can find that power head and lots of other accessories there. And don't forget, of course, if you go shopping through my storefront on Amazon, I do earn commission on any qualifying purchases, so that's a great way you can help support me if you want. Just go to my storefront, do all your Amazon shopping as usual. Won't impact your shopping experience, but it will certainly help to benefit me. So thanks for that. Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, and I will see you real soon on the next one.